the last decade of yearly surveys, which Internations has conducted across dozens of countries, one country in particular rates consistently low on many categories. Founded in 2007, Internations is a global networking organization with the stated mission to make life abroad a great experience. As with most surveys, these are based on the experiences and opinions of many people across dozens of categories, including healthcare, the job market, the friendliness of the local population, housing infrastructure, and many, many more. Now, these results are pretty damning, and it would be very easy to just write them off as subjective opinions which are not representative. But if the results are consistently similar over a long period of time, then this has to raise at least a few questions. Surely this can't all just be expats hating on Germany. So what is actually going on in this case? According to the survey, expats in Germany are among the unhappiest and loneliest worldwide. They have a very hard time making friends, finding housing, and dealing with Germany's lack of digital infrastructure. Now, I think there are two very interesting things going on here, but let's just continue. Germany comes 49th out of 53 in the Expat Insider 2023 survey. Germans rank among the bottom 5 least friendly local populations, and so this might explain why expats are unhappy with their social life and have difficulties in making friends. It is therefore hardly surprising that expats in Germany are among the unhappiest worldwide. Overall, 64% of expats are happy with their life in Germany compared to 72% globally. So just to be clear, a majority are happy with their life, but when compared globally to other countries, it is very much towards the bottom end of the scale. Now, the first thing that's interesting about this is that the survey focuses exclusively on expats, and the second thing is just a fundamental misunderstanding of German culture. By the way, if you're looking for an easy way to file your taxes or get tax advice, then I highly recommend Title, who are currently sponsoring this video. This is an ideal service for those of you who earn income from multiple sources in multiple countries, or just for those of you who are looking for tax assistance in your new place of residence. It's available in over 30 countries. Do check out the link in the description below to find out more details. As someone who has lived abroad for most of their adult life, the term expat has come up quite a lot. When I first moved to China in 2008, I just assumed that this was a term that everyone understood. But now, having lived in other countries, I often am asked the question, what actually does expat mean? Who are expats? And to make matters a little more complex, most non-English speaking countries don't really have a term for this in their own language. Up until a few years ago, I thought the definition was very clear. An expat is somebody who is displaced by their work. They move abroad because either their work requires them to do so or they have applied for an overseas position. Their primary reason for moving is not the search for a better life, although that might come into it, but really just because their company requires their skills elsewhere. In this sense, expats use this as a career building opportunity. They still very much identify with their country of birth, and they don't really have strong intentions of moving there permanently. Germany actually excels in a number of categories related to work. The country rates 15th in the Working Abroad Index, job market is 4th, and job security 5th, which makes it into the top 5 worldwide. And in terms of quality of life, expats really appreciate both the infrastructure for cars and the easy availability of green goods and services. If this definition that I've just laid out is something we could agree on, it does go some way to explaining why expats really struggle to get set up and to thrive in Germany. Part of the reason being is that if you see yourself as an expat, you very much identify with your birth country and have little intention of really integrating into the new country that you decide to move to. You have professional and social networks through your work, and so less of an incentive to get fully integrated. Now, this is a very ambiguous point, which I will come back to later, and I'll also go into why German culture in particular is very difficult to adjust to. But just having this mindset alone means that you will make less of an effort to integrate than if you had the mindset that this was a permanent and final move. However, I'm sure many people will disagree with this definition. If you look up the dictionary definition of expat, there is no real distinction made between expat and immigrant. I myself have been asked, I will say fairly civilly on this channel, to not use the word expat because it is, well, racist. There seems to be growing pushback against the concept of the expat because it is racist, classist, and bigoted. Now, these are very bold claims, and so I decided to look into this, and I really wanted to understand where this idea was coming from and why certain people feel marginalized or even victimized. This led me on a very dark journey to some rather questionable corners of the internet and actually sort of threw up more questions than answers. I came across a lot of rant posts, emotional outbursts, and just generally the bemoaning of the unfairness of life. This rant post in The Guardian from 2015 specifically seems to be the basis for many subsequent arguments. I tried to find more objective data on the topic, which was not particularly easy, but I did come across some sources detailing the origins of the term expat. The term expat does have its roots in colonialism, where citizens of colonial powers living in colonies were termed expatriates. This usage has evolved, but some scholars will still argue that the underlying power dynamics remain, where expatriates are seen as superior or more desirable than migrants, perpetuating a colonial mindset. Scholars such as Edward Said have pointed out that the word expat often carries a sense of privilege and superiority, which can be traced back to colonial times when Europeans living in colonies were considered expatriates, while the local population or those moving to the colonizing country were not. Said and others like him argue that the term expat versus immigrant is not just a matter of semantics, but reflects deeper racial and socio-economic divides. People from wealthy, predominantly white countries are often seen as cosmopolitan and global citizens, while those from poorer, predominantly non-white countries are seen as economic migrants, even if they are doing essentially the same work. Now, the term expat is obviously linguistically neutral and is just short for the term expatriate, which literally means living outside your native country. The term itself does not carry any inherently racial connotations and can be used to apply to anyone, regardless of their race or socio-economic status. Dictionaries and linguistic studies show that expat is derived from the Latin word expatriatus, meaning out of the fatherland. Its original and primary meaning focuses on the fact of living abroad, not on race or class. As I mentioned at the beginning, the term expat is associated with temporary or sort of work assignments abroad. It is particularly associated to professionals taking on work assignments abroad and can be applied to anyone fitting this description. Corporate policies and HR practices often refer to people who take on work assignments abroad as expats, and this is the same in Western and non-Western countries. The term is used to describe the nature of the work rather than an individual's ethnicity or socio-economic status. However, the work element of an expat very often does refer to professional positions, and so there is an element of socio-economic class baked into the connotations of this term. You kind of have to work for a company large enough to have international operations in other countries, and so this will generally be government or some sort of corporate role. So based on this definition, you can't be an expat if your company is not large enough to have branches in other countries, or at the very least, you have to have your work set up before you actually leave for the new country. And as many expats will know, these positions can be highly lucrative. Very often the company will handle everything from work visas to residency permits to setting up accommodation. Depending on where you move to and what your position is, you may get really huge perks like personal chauffeur, a company car. You'll be set up with many business and social networking events. And so obviously this kind of lifestyle is very different compared to the immigrant who has to do everything themselves. Germany performs very poorly in all three subcategories of the ease of settling in index. Local friendliness rated at 50th, finding friends 49th, and culture and welcome also 49th. Now, based on this discussion of expats so far, these results do not surprise me. I've talked on numerous occasions at great length about what I call the culture of sincerity in Germany. Other people will probably call it bluntness. Just the fact that if you move here from the Anglosphere, you will no doubt find the Germans very rude. Most people in their first 6 months or first year will be able to relay an experience where Germans humiliated them or were very rude. For people coming from the Anglosphere or also from many Asian cultures where politeness is really an integral part of the culture, this is one of the things that people really struggle with when getting set up in Germany. And obviously, if you are a member of a network like Internations, where you have a lot of other people who are going through very similar culture shocks and who will understand exactly what you're going through, why would you persevere? Why would you try to crack the walnut shell and really get to know Germans properly and try to make friends with them if you have this other subset of people, this group of people who are very similar to you and understand exactly what you're going through? And so because of this, Germans remain cold, aloof, and distant. During my time in Beijing, I really was very much in an expat bubble, and I have to admit the people that I came into contact with were either students or English teachers, or they were diplomats, CEOs, CFOs, executives of huge companies, to do with business, engineering, aviation, finance, management consultancy, these kind of things. And so while I do think there is an element of class bound into the concept of the expat, I think the racial argument is a little bit thin. Internations themselves publish that one of their largest member groups are Indians, along with Americans and Brits and also many other European countries, and also Brazilians. And so if anyone from India or Brazil is watching this, please do comment down below. Would you call yourself an expat, or do you feel excluded from this concept? The local Chinese that used to mingle in these social circles in Beijing when I was there were also of a very similar socioeconomic status. They worked for big multinationals, they spoke very good English, they flew all around the world. And so what bound all these people together from very different cultures and backgrounds was really their socioeconomic status. It had nothing to do with race. Expats rate Germany as the hardest place to get started. Germany ranks last in the Expat Essentials Index, which covers the topics of digital life, admin topics, housing, and the language. The lacking digital infrastructure and the language barrier frustrate expats immensely. German places last for cashless payment options and second to last for easy access to high-speed internet. Half of the expats find it difficult to live in Germany without speaking the local language, and this is a problem, as 60% find German difficult to learn. Now, I'm not going to lie, my first 2 years here were really grueling. It was not easy at all. But I came here with a mindset of integrating from the go. That was one of my main goals when I first moved here. And so I put a lot of energy and effort into learning the language and into trying to meet local people. However, if you'd asked me to share my views after a year of living in Germany, as opposed to now, 13 years later, my answer would be vastly different. It really was a struggle getting set up here. But then again, I've never seen myself as an expat in Germany. I think part of the issue is that this definition of temporary skilled worker, which I've been using up until now, while I think is the most accurate, it's definitely not watertight. With the rate and scale of globalization, you don't necessarily have to work for a massive multinational in order to move country. Solopreneurs and digital nomads have maybe confused the terminology even further. These are typically individuals who make money from the internet, and they move specifically to a foreign country to take advantage of the economic situation. So these are usually people from rich countries who go to live in poorer countries so that they can afford a better standard of living. While digital nomads and expats do share some similarities, I would argue that digital nomads are even less invested in the local culture, because they will just pick up and move if the cost of living rises or the economic situation changes. They will move to another country where it is again easier to operate from. The role of an expat working in a multinational corporation or a government department often really has a lot to do with furthering the cultural or the business interests of that country. And so they really are required to be economically and culturally literate in the country that they are living in. When I lived in Beijing, I did an internship for the China British Business Council, and as the name suggests, this organization was tasked with helping British business get set up in China. And if you are trying to help businesses get set up in another country, this not only requires you to know the language, but also the intricacies of tax law and regulations and a legal code and a lot of other cultural intricacies. And so the idea that expats, don't have anything to do with the local culture is really misguided, and I think peddled by people who have actually never been abroad. Now, this might be a little bit confusing, given that I just said at the beginning that being an expat or having the expat mindset means that you are less invested in the country, but this really is just all a matter of degrees. Ultimately, an immigrant who picks up sticks, and I will define as somebody who's moving to a new place in search of a better life, for them it is a much more permanent move. They are leaving their native country behind, and so they are very much more invested in making it work. Maybe part of the problem is that this definition has just become too loose, and there are too many people calling themselves expats when they are actually not. I, for example, would never refer to myself as an expat living in Germany. I've been here for over 10 years. I've changed jobs several times. I really don't have anything to do with the expat community in my city, and I feel fully integrated in German society. And I also would not call myself an immigrant, though, because I'm half Swiss, half British. I've lived in Germany for a long time. And although European countries do have a lot of differences, the culture on the whole has a lot more similarities compared to somewhere like China, where the whole economic, cultural, political climate is just very much more foreign to me than Germany. It sounds so simple, but I truly believe that if you make the move with the mindset that this is a permanent, final decision, you will be a lot happier in the host country wherever you end up living. Some have argued that the term expat should be dropped altogether in favor of just the word immigrant. The problem with this is that it does still have relevance and still describes a particular cohort of people who move to another country. And yes, there are socio-economic connotations attached to the concept of expat, but my question is, what is the problem with that? It doesn't have to mean that there is some sort of miscarriage of justice. Every profession has socio-economic connotations attached to it. Just thinking of the term like a lawyer or a bricklayer conjures up very different images in your mind. Is it wrong to think that the lawyer is educated and the bricklayer is working class? Languages and terminology have evolved over thousands of years, and while they may carry encapsulated within them outdated beliefs and ideas, they still have utility. Trying to outright ban or bully people into the way they speak is really very short-sighted. The linguistic landscape surrounding the movement of people will undoubtedly change and continue to evolve, but the term expat does accurately describe the movement of a particular cohort of people. If you are an expat struggling to get set up in Germany and integrate into German society, I've talked about this many times, but my advice would be to join a club or a Verein, as they call them here. It doesn't really matter if that's a sports club, if it's a hiking club, a gardening club, cooking, reading, whatever it is. This is one way that Germans meet people and make friends. Because after all, that's what makes life worth living, isn't it? Thank you so much for watching. If you need tax advice, do make sure to check out title in the link below. If you want more from me, do make sure to sign up to my newsletter. The link is also down in the description. Let me know what you thought of this video. Please let me know how you see the term expat and why you maybe struggle in Germany. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.